Structure or dynamics in the middle game is the theme of this video on GM Talks. And it's a very important subject. It's very difficult to understand. And I think the more examples you see, the better you will grasp what it's all about. So let's just jump into it. This will not be an easy video, but if you understand some of these things, learn some of the rules of these positions, you will do better. We have this recent game, Levon Aronian versus Vincent Keymer, and it's played in Berlin FIDE Grandprix. It was played in the 6th of February this year, so it's very recent. And this is the Aronian, which we have seen a lot here on GM Talks. And we have a Carlsbad structure, which if you want to know more about this, we have a big masterclass in the Carlsbad structure, so don't hesitate to go to that. Bishop d3, this is a nice place for the bishop. h3. Why do you play h3? Well, you play h3 to avoid bishop g4. This is clear. If this bishop can't get out, then the Carlsbad structure is not much fun for white, or in this case black, because the bishop will be bad on the queen side. It has to get out and become active. So this is a smart move. By the way, some of black players have started to play something like this. Anyway, knight c6. And here the main move is c3, and this position is pretty interesting. Instead, Aronian goes for everything by not allowing e5 due to the knight takes e5. But is this a good move? The question hangs on one move, and if you know these kind of positions, you would know what the move is, because c3 took away this square. So this square has not been taken away this time, so you can't get everything. And here he goes knight here. Okay, so this bishop, and if you don't really want to give away this bishop, but if you move it, then he will get his bishop out and attacking here. And even though you probably are fine in something like this, black is okay in this structure. There's no problems at all. So this is not what white want. But knight b4 is also spending some tempi that you're not going to get back. And Aronian plays knight c3, giving up this bishop. And we know this bishop is better than the knight. So this is interesting. Knight c3, very dynamic. And we're going to see the idea a little later. g6 makes sense. Knight here. And this is one of the problems, of course, of moving the knight away from this square. This outpost is pretty nice for white. a6. There was threatening a check here. He could also have taken on d3, but he was not ready to do that yet. And rook e1. And white is playing dynamically very active moves, just putting his pieces out, preventing black from developing. And this one as well. And every piece is now out, and white is already pretty comfortable. He's probably already threatening to move the knight away and then play a3 and get the bishop back, or get the bishop out of the way. So he decided to take. And here comes a shocking move for some of you. C takes. Now, what is that? That's an interesting move, isn't it? You give yourself double isolated pawns here. That looks crazy. Okay, we'll just wait a little moment before we discuss this structure in full. So while black is quick to attack, he attacks this pawn, attacks this pawn, trying to get something going. Knight goes back, might be threatening here, and knight takes here. In the other case, he would probably take with the pawn. If you take on f6, okay, e6. taking away and here. Okay, this structure we will have a small discussion. So I put up the structure without, we're not gonna save it, no, without any pieces or kings. So what can we say about this structure? Well, if we don't have any pieces on the board, then this structure is sort of probably drawn, but white might lose the endgame due to Zugzwang because they are not movable, these pawns, while black still has some moves and so on. So it will not be easy, but they're controlling, of course, a lot of squares here. And we can start to understand what's going on here. This structure, the more pieces that are on the board, the less of a problem these two pawns here are, and the more they give in dynamics, because having these pawns here also ensures that you will have this under control. So you have a lot of central squares under control. Actually, there's no good places for black pieces to go anywhere except for attacking the pawns. And if white is very active, it's not so easy. So, and here's the rule. Here's the rule. The more pieces on the board, the better this structure is for white. The less pieces on the board, the bigger a problem and the weaker the pawns become. Okay? So far, so good. So you can say that if we have a knight ending, for instance, that would be really unpleasant for white, because black would put a knight. He could put it on this square or this square and attack here, and black white will already be very, very uncomfortable in this situation. It might not be losing, but it's definitely not very funny to defend this kind of thing. So with a knight, it's bad. Bishop could be a draw, maybe. But it's still unpleasant to have these double pawns. So they are only good if you have, they give great central control, and if you can have some sort of dynamics, then it's fine. If you don't have dynamics, if you don't have anything, then they will just become weak, these pawns. So knowing, and I know it's very confusing because they look very weak, but sometimes they're just strong, and they are in this game. So that's the problem. Another thing we can see is that all black pawns are on white squares, which means that the bishop, we know already, is sitting here, is a bad bishop. It's just colorblind, walking around on the same square as its own bishop. And we also see the problem with the black pawn story is that this square here is where you will probably set a knight or something, and if you want to move this, then a lot of your pawns become very weak and attackable. So it's not so easy to get rid of that knight, and the knight here on e5 is so dominant that you can't sort of play around it, which is something you would like to do. Okay, let's get back to the game. Queen d2. And white is of course playing on the black squares, and he's very happy. He's got this this pawn here, this pawn here, because it takes away everything. It's kind of counterplay on the white squares. And believe me, white is already clearly better here. And so what did black do wrong? Well, he wasted some tempi, and then he sort of didn't solve the problems of the strategy. He's of course might be threatening this, but it's not so easy. And we see that this bishop is a real problem for black. Rook here, of course, this file is very interesting, and there's a big hole here. There's also holes here, and so on. And black's structure is not that good anymore. But a5 was sort of also needed, because queen a5 and knight b6 or something will also be very unpleasant. Bishop f4 is always in the air. So he's trying to get pieces out. Knight here, b6, bishop f4, attacking the queen, and of course the queen has to go to e7, otherwise this would follow because of the pin here on so he has to go to e7, and here comes a very surprising move. I gave it away in the thumbnail, I admit it, but we already discussed this bishop. This bishop is bad, right? It's bad bishop. And what do white do here? He takes on d7. And the reason is very clear. This bad bishop protects these squares, so they're helping protecting the c file. So getting rid of it means that it will be very difficult for black to ever get back into the c file, and as a matter of fact, he does so, but only when white is completely dominating. So knight takes d7, very surprising move and very strong. And of course, here comes the rook, and white has changed one advantage for another advantage. Very typical procedure. When you have an advantage, you always on the lookout to change it into another kind of advantage. So black is fighting for the c file, but he's of course in some serious trouble here. We also see that even though black's structure is still fine and white still has this problem, white's dynamic and active pieces is such a problem for black that he cannot really use his good structure. And as we saw before, as a rule of thumb, it's a good thing to exchange a lot of things, but here it doesn't help because white's dominance continue in the endgame. And we see this rook is extremely strong. How to defend here? I don't know. This pawn is weak, this pawn is weak, and all the pieces are weak, and these are still some sort of a barrier for black that the knight can't sort of cross. When they become weak, they become very weak, and then it's always lost, and you look really stupid for having taken them. But when they don't become weak, they are really a good force, these kind of pieces. We also see that in some structure where white get allow the bishop here to be taken and take back the pawn to increase his central control over e5. That happens a lot in, for instance, the Queen's Gambit and things like that. d8, rook b7. Taking over some squares, preventing the knight from moving. It's kind of nice. Also might be threatening this move, but he's not going for that. And this is like we have discussed a little bit earlier. Good technique is keeping control, and especially trying to stay dominant. When you have dominance, you often will win. And this, by the way, Aronian is what we call a reflector. We have discussed that a little bit in the player types, and he's very good at this dominance, of course. So he understands completely that he's not gonna just win a pawn and let black have a lot of counterplay. That would be stupid. He's trying to keep black tied down and then win the game. And knight e5, and this of course is serious and seriously annoying for black. He would like not to have to take this knight, but there's no way around it. It's too dominant here, and there goes the structure. The structure is now such that white has a fine structure, and black is still having a very bad knight here, and white has a dominant bishop, dominant rook, and a weak pawn here. So he only needs to get the king into the game, for instance on this square, and he will win. Rook c8 of course is a natural move. d4, taking away any kind of counterplay with knight d7. There's no reason to allow things like that. This knight now cannot move at all without being lost. Rook a7, also a smart move, preventing anything from, the rook cannot leave because there's always a check here. And b3, for instance here, you can't take because of rook a8 and winning a piece. So you have to stay on the c file. h6. And notice here that black would love for white to go here and exchange the rooks, because that would relieve him of his biggest problems, which is white's dominant rook on the 7th rank. But white has a clear plan. He just has to make some inroads on the king side and he will win. This knight is blocked here on d7. By the way, if you notice it, this is a so-called Fischer endgame. This is a Fischer endgame with bishop and rook versus knight and rook, and the bishop is better piece. And black is just condemned to complete passivity. And h5 trying to create some weaknesses. g5, f4 does not help. Then you will get a passed h pawn. So this might run this way. And you're still trying to provoke d5. What happens after this is something like this, and then you can go back, and here you will just put this here, and this one will queen. And there's no counterplay because you can't really do anything due to this dominance with the knight and the rook. I've noticed here f6 is never good. You take, and then you will have this and winning the knight. Okay, and g4, and you don't even, you know that after g5 you can always go king and f4, no problem. f4 is coming, and g5, and that's an elegant move. I like that move. It looks so ridiculous to put the pawn on here, but after this move, white has the very unpleasant h5, and black resigned. This is just completely lost. So what a great game by Aronian, and very interesting situation we have here with this structure. Good or bad? That's the question. White has a lot of things going for him, but if black somehow was able to swap a lot of pieces and have knight versus knight, he would be clearly better, because then the pawns would be weak. So the rules of thumb is the more pieces on the board, the more acceptable this kind of structure is. And as the exchanges, there come more exchanges, then it becomes a bigger problem along the way. Anyway, this was GM Talks with another video. I hope you liked it. Remember to share and like. Thank you for watching.